Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my videos about interview questions for Kubernetes. Before I get started, I want to let you know that this is from a GitHub repo that I have already published. So if you would rather have a written version of this, the link to that repo will be down below in the descriptions. So let's get started. So first question today is, what is the command for running getting all the details about a persistence volume that's already been deployed on your cluster, right? Why would an interviewer ask this question? And this is because if you have any experience with Kubernetes in production, you would know this command without any effort whatsoever. So he or she is looking for your familiarity with the kubectl commands, which should be pretty easy for you. So again, the command is obviously pretty easy. It's just kubectl describe PV. PV is short for persistent volume, and foo is the name of the volume, right? So it's a very easy command to remember, especially if you're dealing with Kubernetes day by day. So that's what they're looking for. Next question, how does the master server authenticate with itself with etcd? So just some back. So here the interviewer is looking for your understanding of how the control components are authenticating itself with each other, right? Because otherwise, if you didn't have this mechanism, there'll be a massive security hole in your cluster. So that's what they're going for, your understanding of the security between system components in Kubernetes. So in this case, the answer is, so in the master server, there is a config file for all the things that run on them, right? That config file in turn points to two certificate files. Those certificate files are given to etcd when the first time the master server communicates with etcd. Etcd verifies those certificates, and if they're good, then it will talk back to the master server. Again, the point of this is for you to know how each component are secured against each other. That's what the interviewer is looking for. Next question, some examples of commands that master server, this is BS. So nobody will ask these questions on an interview. So I'm going to skip that. Next question, steps to create a pod called foo with image, Redis with CPU request, blah, 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 blah. They're not going to ask you such detailed questions in an interview, but they will be looking for how you go about doing this, right? So what are the requirements here? The requirement is you're creating a pod from a certain image, right? And here's the key for this particular question. They're looking to see how you define the request and the limits of resource usage for that pod. So just some background, a pod gets certain, has a request limit and a limit, meaning it first asks for X amount of CPU and X amount of memory. However, it also says this should be my limit, means never do you let me go beyond this particular CPU usage and memory usage. So there's the burst and there is the initial request, right? Those are the two things. To get back to the question though, the thing here the thing to know about this question is you do a kubectl run command. That's pretty easy to remember if you're doing anything with Kubernetes, but you have to remember that you can supply these options right in the command, right? And the commands can be slightly different. That's okay. But again, so if we take a look at the requirements, first requirement was a name. So name comes right after run. You should know that if you're dealing with Kubernetes any amount of time. Then -- image. That's something that you should also know. Now you may not know the exact option for the CPU request and limits, but you can find that out using kubectl run -h command or -help command, right? So that's the answer you would be giving to the interviewer, saying, first I'm going to define the name, then I'm going to define the image, then I'm going to look up how exactly to pass the requirements for the resource usage, and I'm going to use that to create the pod. So he or she is looking for those steps in your mind as to how you're going to go about doing that. All right, next question, true or false? Pod definition only points to PVC and does not refer to persistent volume. This is an important one because the persistent volume claim and the mounting of those volumes onto a container, there are three different steps. And if you look at the kubernetes.io website, the documentation is very thorough, but not very clear because they jump right into all kinds of details. It confuses you. And that's also true for the CK exam. So this is a good topic for the interviewer to pick up, because if you haven't dealt with this regularly during your work, it will show on your answer, right? Because if you notice that he or she is not asking you to do any kind of specific, they're just asking something that you should already know conceptually if you dealt with PVs and PVCs. So in this case, the persistence volume, there's a one-to-one mapping between persistence volume and persistence volume claim. And there's in the containers, and the pod mounts the persistence volume claim using the persistence volume claim. It never actually mentions the persistence volume. Its ticket to talk to the volume is through PVC. Now, once the pod mounts it with a name, containers then mounts the same volume. It can mount into a different file system in the containers from the same volume. That's why you can just refer to the volume name in the pod definition, and then just mount it anywhere it wants to mount it. So these are the different layers of actually getting a disk to be mounted on a container. So you should know those three levels, and you should know how they kind of work together and what the relationship between them. So the interviewer is looking for your familiarity with Kubernetes persistence volume without asking you to do any specific task or asking you any specific commands or code, right? So that's how he or she would be evaluating you. Our last question for today, kubectl command to create deployment with the BusyBox version 1.13. Once again, the interviewer is not looking for you to know the command start to end. That is not the point. The point is you can figure out what the command should be just by going through step-by-step steps. In this case, we're creating a deployment, so you use kubectl. This is actually wrong. This should be create. It should be kubectl create name of the deployment. Create deployment and the name of the deployment. So there are two mistakes here, so I need to fix that. And then you give the image just like you would do for a pod, and then you give all the other options. That's the point. You tell the interviewer there are other options I'm going to use, and I'm going to get this option just by running kubectl create deployment -h command. It gives me all the options just like a man page on the Unix machine. And then you can just say, look, I'm going to use -- minus busybox, blah, 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 blah. And then it looks like in this particular question, they're not even asking for any more details. But even if they did, you could figure it out in real time just by running that command. That's the answer you give to the interviewer. All right, so I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next Kubernetes interview video.